Welcome to today's webinar on common member inquiries. My name is Daniela Jukic and I'll be your moderator today. And our webinar is sponsored by our Platinum partner, BP. Allow me to introduce you to today's speaker, Richard Calver, Member Services Advisor on Compliance and Workplace Relations. At NatRoad, as you would expect, we get presented with a number of similar inquiries from our member base, based on workplace relations and business issues. In this webinar, we explore some of the common questions that have popped up recently. The questions and answers have implications for all our members. So today we'll be exploring, how do I treat an employee who refuses to convert from casual employment? What happens if I've had my identity stolen? And is there a minimum wage rise in 2020? Before I hand over the mic to Richard to begin his presentation, I do have a few housekeeping items to cover about this presentation. I request that you pop your microphone on silent to avoid any disturbance during the webinar. But like always, we'd love to hear from you during the presentation. If you have any questions for our speaker, please feel free to type it in the questions pane of your control panel that's situated on the right hand of your screen. You may send your questions in at any time during the presentation, and we'll be answering the questions at the end of the session. So without further ado, I'd like to kick things off by welcoming Richard. Over to you.
Thanks very much, Daniela, and really appreciate the introduction. So we devised this webinar before the massive inquiries that we receive related to cross-border issues. The overwhelming number of inquiries we're getting at the moment about cross-border issues. The three inquiries, though, that I've got to explain to you today are ongoing, resonate for the future, and let me start out by saying that there's an area on our website where we endeavour every day to update the cross-border inquiries matters. But look, if you on this webinar and you've got any queries about cross-border issues, and there are so many of them, we had like 20 to 30 phone calls yesterday. There are so many of them that if you want to ask a question about that at the end, I'm happy to take that and provide an answer or take it on notice. So as Daniela said, today's webinar is proudly sponsored by BP. They might be so proud of me when they get to the end, but you know what I mean. It's my attempt at humour. So more seriously, these are inquiries that resonate. That means they have application to more than one member. And they are based on three questions that individual members have recently asked or queries that they've raised. And so we think that these questions have a lot of relevance to most NatRoad members. The first one is, what do I do if my employee refuses to convert from casual to full-time status? So in this context, let's have a look at the engagement of casual employees. There have been recent federal court decisions where employers have lost, and so long as a casual worker has a regular and ongoing pattern of work, they've been able to keep their casual loading, the amount that they're paid because of their insecure status as an employee, and they've been able to back claim annual leave and personal carers leave, as well as compassionate leave and payment for public holidays. This links somewhat into the award, where clause 11.6I of the award defines an irregular casual employee as someone who has been engaged to perform work on an occasional or a non-systematic or irregular basis. Now, if your casual workers are not employed on a non-systematic or irregular basis, then they are able, under the current law, to claim that they're full-time employees. So what's been happening is some members have been asking those casual employees who've been working on a regular basis to confirm their full-time status. And in one instance, the casual regular employee said no. So, what do you do in these current circumstances? The employer took NatRoad advice to review the contracts of casual employees, and the employee said no. because I don't want to be paid less. And that's the difficulty we have. Employees push back about being paid less. The other issue that arose was, in this particular instance, the company had obtained a contract which they thought would be of limited duration because it was to cope with additional work generated by the pandemic. And they needed this employee, or at least another casual driver, to fulfill that contract. And like a lot of contracts that we see at NatRoad, the problem with it is that even though you might invest a heavy vehicle into servicing that contract, the minimum guaranteed levels of work that you want for a decent contract aren't there. So it pays to have a casual employee. So the first thing is, if the casual refused, document matters. Document that refusal. Document the irregularity that will come with the new contract, and hope that they won't sue you for back pay when they leave, with all of that evidence that you've built up, that you offered them full-time work, that you said they were going to be an irregular, and that you now, from the time that they signed that new agreement, we're going to be on an irregular basis, and that linked with this contract. The other problem is that the employee could be, because of this new contract, issued a fixed term. Now, these are not very well used in our industry, but basically you could link the contract you offered the employee to the contract you had for the additional work. So when that commercial contract came to an end, so would this fixed term contract. Or you could engage the employee on, say, a rolling 3 months basis, so long as the terms at law about what needs to go into a fixed term contract were evident. And NatRoad has a precedent in that space which we use. So the choices were documentation and making sure that the casual loading that they were paid was shown separately, documenting their refusal to become a permanent employee, moving on to then dismiss them if they didn't follow a normal direction about working irregular hours, or the preferred alternative, moving them to a full-time fixed-term contract that linked with the commercial contract. And that's the advice that I gave in this instance. And the fixed-term contracts were prepared by NatRoad on a fee-for-service basis, quite a small amount of money, and they're now in place. So the casual employment notion, NatRoad's called for legislative action to be taken in the face of the federal court turning the law of casuals on their head. And what we find is what happened in this case, that people want to be casuals because they're paid more, they're paid that casual loading, and they've got more money in their pocket as they work. So this problem, we think, resonates with a lot more members, and it's also a better way of connecting your commercial contracts with your employment contracts to have employees on a fixed term basis. So the specifics of a fixed term contract are where, as I said earlier, they're employed for a specific duration or a specific task. In the current case, whilst a new commercial contract exists. So the second point is that you may well need to show that the casual is engaged intermittently, where the work under the new contract is intermittent. And that means that there will be an irregular casual engaged. You won't have to offer them conversion to full-time work under the award, and it's a true casual engagement. Now again, come to NatRoad to write those contracts because the law has changed. So, second question, and this really was a unique situation For me, I'd not advised about what you do when the identity is stolen before, and it led me down to some very interesting paths, because an operator's identity was stolen, and even though in this instance the hacker didn't get full control of the operator's computer, the computer emails were not being sent to the intended recipients, and they weren't getting any emails in at all. So essentially, whilst they were trying to send emails, those just went to the cloud, into the ether, and the hacker had got control, partial control, of the operator's computer. As a result, some notices to produce in respect of who the driver was when there was an alleged failure to go into a heavy vehicle inspection area were responded to by email, but were never received by RMS. So RMS, or Transport for New South Wales as it's now known, now you can see on the second dot point there it says and it should be and the operator got a fine. We had to prove to RMS that to Transport for New South Wales that the emails responding to the notice to produce had been sent. So the member at great expense had to get a computer person in to their workplace to show that the emails had been sent and to actually get them working again. They had to have new email, they had to have a new computer system, and it cost them a lot of money. Looking into this more deeply, it's extraordinary the number of scams that go on in this country. That the figure of $634 million losses by Australians, a lot of business people, to those scamming them is quite extraordinary. And the ACCC tell me that the number of people who are subject to scams has increased because of COVID, because so much more is being done electronically. So how do these people actually get your identity? What is identity theft? Well, what they do is they get your personal information to steal money or gain other benefits. And they do that by what the notion is of called of phishing, P-H-I-S-H-I-N-G. And they do that by sending you emails or text messages and pretending to be someone that they're not. I've had personal experience of this when a few years ago now, I was registering trademarks for the company that I was the lawyer for, and out of the blue, they got a notice to pay for the international use of that trademark issued out of all places, out of Bulgaria. So they said to me, you didn't tell us that we would need to pay for the international use of this trademark, and they sent me a copy of the invoice before they paid it. Luckily, because it was just a scam. The people had set up an official looking invoice with a bank account to pay this alleged fee, and I said, don't pay them, it's a scam. And then we reported it to the ACCC. So that's what these people are doing. They're sending what they believe things like from your bank. They know you bank with Westpac, so that they make up a piece of letterhead with that on it, and then they ask you to confirm personal details. So could you please confirm your email? Could you please confirm your bank password? And some people are giving it to them. Never put passwords or personal information into emails unless you can absolutely avoid it. Some of the other things is the fake online quizzes and surveys, and I would therefore advise anybody, small business, not to take those quizzes that come up in Facebook and say, what was your mother's maiden name? We can explore your astrological profile if you give it to us. Well, don't, because that's one of the questions that quite often come up to verify your identity and verify your passwords. There are even fake job advertisements, so be very careful about what personal information you give if you're applying for a position. And if you're asked for personal or corporate information from places like the Australia tax office. They don't send out unsolicited emails. Check with them to make sure it's a legitimate communication. In this instance, as I said earlier, the scammer didn't get full access to the computer, but the disruption it caused the business was just dire. Not only getting us involved to help them with the fine out of Transport for New South Wales, but generally recreating their computer system, sending all of their customers their new email address. And you know, one step more and the scammer would have got access to their bank accounts. So the other way that that scammers are dealing with this, if you lose your mobile phone, they're able to port that phone number to another phone, and then because mobile phones are often used for two-factor authentication, you get sent a code to go into, say, the MyGov site, or to get into a secure location through your bank when you're making a payment. That poses a serious risk of financial fraud and identity theft. So if you ever lose your mobile phone, just immediately notify your bank, immediately notify other suppliers and tell them your new phone number, and change your passwords overnight. Just change them. So this is a diagram that I took from the ACCC's report on scamming, and it's a very good summary of how they get into your system. A simple theft, you know, breaking into your mailbox. So making sure you've got a secure mailbox is very important. We've spoken about phishing. We've spoken about the fake online quizzes. We haven't spoken about fake online stores to purchase things. Hacking, obviously, that's very difficult, and make sure you've got a nice secure system in place. Social media is a fertile ground for stealing your identity. And then what they do is sometimes they take over your computer to try and get your bank account details. Sometimes they'll send you what amounts to blackmail note. They can drain your bank account certainly up to the limits that you put in at the least. And it's very disruptive for your operations generally, as we found out with the particular operator I helped, who was trying to respond to a notice to produce. That matter still hasn't been resolved as to whether or not they waive the fine. So I asked for them to expedite that matter, because I was going to talk about it today, but Transport for New South Wales is still considering whether or not they will apply that fine to the company, or whether or not the subsequent emails we sent in the attempt to answer that will be sufficient. So that was an interesting matter that relates to everybody in NatRoad and outside of NatRoad. The third query I'm going to go through very quickly, so that the wage review process generally every year happens with a pay increase from the first pay period on or after 1 July 2020. This year, though, that hasn't happened for the Transport Awards and a range of other awards. What's happened is that the Commission has said that for some awards, it was from 1 July 2020, but none in the transport area. The wage increase at 1.75% will operate from the first pay period on or 1 November 2020. So the two documents that I've got there are the draft wage determinations that will apply from 1 November 2020. They will apply from that time, and if you want to access them for budgeting purposes, you can just add 1.75% to all the current wage rates for your budgeting process for this year. Now we don't know what's going to happen from 1 July 2021. It certainly will depend very much on COVID and whether or not COVID is still around and having such a detrimental effect on the economy. But for all of our members who employ, budget for a 1.75% 5% wage increase from the first pay period on or after 1 November. Closer to that date, we will put on our website updated wage rates and expense allowances. In the meantime, if you want the exact detail of how they're going to go up in respect to wage rates, not expense allowances, because that hasn't been set yet, please click on these links once these slides are up on our website. So if you have any questions, I'm willing to answer them. I think I'm a little ahead of time. I do speak very quickly, and it's not proudly sponsored by Bridgestone, and it says there it's sponsored by BP. So I better get off that slide. Daniela, any questions?
So far, we haven't had any questions from our attendees today. But just as a reminder, as Richard did explain, we have had a lot of inquiries coming through for our border control questions. We do have a dedicated website page on that, on the natroad.com.au site. So if any questions come through on that, feel free to give us a call or send through personalised emails, because it is a very confusing space. These slides will be uploaded to the website today, so if anyone needs to click on those links, you'll be able to activate those as well.
Yes.
I'll just leave the floor open for a little bit more to see if we've got any questions.
Sure, because these webinars normally go for half an hour, and I've gone for 22 minutes, but that's okay. Let me also emphasise that the contracts that we prepare for employment are a fraction of the cost if you go to a private provider, and we can tailor them to your business. We charge $150 an hour plus GST, and generally we can tailor your contracts in 1 to 2 hours. That includes fixed term contracts and casual employment. So you know, I'm not saying that to advertise our services. I'm saying that to be helpful, because having a written contract in place takes away a lot of that uncertainty and angst.
And takes away that risk as well, doesn't it, Richard?
Well, not completely, because obviously, you know, the law in this area is very much in favour of those who want to make a claim, but it ameliorates the risk. So sorry, I wasn't trying to jump all over what you said there, Daniela, but yeah, it ameliorates the risk, it reduces the risk. It can't, in this casual area at the moment, it can't eliminate it completely, unfortunately, because at the moment in other sectors, not yet in the transport sector, there are a whole lot of class actions where ambulance chasing lawyers are jumping on the bandwagon to sue a range of employers in particular industries that employ casuals, and that's particularly going on in the mining industry, funded by unions and parasitic litigation funders.
Okay, well, very good advice, Richard. I'd actually also like to highlight to our members that are currently online on this webinar, we actually have a special edition webinar next week on the 29th of July, so same time on Wednesday at 11 a.m. And we'll be looking at or re-looking at the COVID-19 safety and hygiene protocols, specifically protecting drivers. So with the recent surge in Victoria and Melbourne, we need to rehash those safety requirements, and we'll be touching on discussing temperature checks and correct use of face masks that we didn't actually touch on earlier. So that EDM will be sent out to all members today, and the link will be up on our website on our events page, so you can register, and it'll also go on socials too. Do encourage people to register for that seminar, because it will be really, really helpful. We all need to do our part in staying on top of COVID and staying safe.
That's very good, because one of the outstanding questions that we're working on at the moment is the lack of clarity around the Victorian edict about wearing face masks, whether or not heavy vehicle drivers have to wear them in the cab. Now we're getting clarification of that, and hopefully we'll have a really good answer before the webinar next week. So that's just one of the many issues that are still in the mix. Yes,
and as soon as we do get that answer, our members will be receiving that either via email, on socials, or on our website. So I think, Richard, we've left the floor open long enough. We haven't received any questions, but again, members, I encourage you to send us an email or give us a call if you're a little bit shy and might want to ask something offline. And thank you again, and we'll see you or hear from you all on next Wednesday, the 29th at 11 a.m. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.